Hi. Hello and welcome to Northampton Borough Council's Holocaust Memorial Day 2021. This year's theme is to be the light in the darkness. Between 1941 and 45, the systematic murder of the Jewish people is known as the Holocaust. A dark term for an incredibly dark time in human history. The Holocaust era saw 11 million people murdered for their religion or for being disabled or their ethnicity and sexual orientation. We had the opportunity to celebrate 75 years since our victory in Europe last year, despite facing our own difficult time with the pandemic. And there will, of course, be light today with your help. This message is very clear. We must be the light in the darkness. To be the light, we must stay united against injustices, and we must practice solidarity against division and hatred. Today, darkness can take on many forms that is dangerous in its own ways, and we must stick together in resisting them all. Whether online, in the classroom or workplace, we must always be vigilant. A message of hate can be prevailing, especially during tough times, and this will not be tolerated. I ask of you, the people of Northampton, to be the light. Where you see this darkness, I plead that you spread one of the most important things in my mind: kindness, understanding and tolerance. We can all play a role in making sure that the events of the Holocaust are never, ever repeated, and that we can all enjoy a peaceful and unprejudiced society that we deserve. So please be the light in the darkness, lest we forget, never forget.
Amongst the important reasons for marking Holocaust Memorial Day is, of course, the reminder of the scale and the extent of the dreadful acts that took place during the Holocaust. Alongside this is the reminder that the risk of such inhumanity is ever present, as seen through other subsequent atrocities. And so it is only by actively remembering, as we do here today, that we can be certain that we keep the risk of this in mind and continually take action to ensure that as communities within the one Northampton community, we remain fully mindful of the full extent of the horror of the Holocaust and acts of mass genocide. The Holocaust threatened the very fabric of civilization, and genocide must still be resisted every day. Our world often feels fragile and vulnerable, and we cannot be complacent. Even in the UK, prejudice and language of hatred must be challenged by us all. Here in Northampton, it is only by standing together in events such as this, and also by striving to work together in our everyday endeavours, that we can truly say we are doing all we can to promote understanding. Despite the dreadful threat that we have faced from coronavirus during the past 10 months, perhaps one positive is the increased unity and respect amongst organisations and the whole population that we have all felt. Northampton has a strong practice of its various communities working together as part of the overall Northampton community. And that is something to be continued and something to be extremely proud of. So in their two different ways, both marking this day formally as we do, but also ensuring that we work together in every possible way, represents two equally vital strands of how we can be doing our very best to ensure that we never find ourselves victims of or part of atrocity and inhumanity. Thank you.
Good evening and welcome to the Great Hill here at the Guildhall in Northampton. As with all things, for the last 10 months we're having to do everything in a slightly different way, so thank you for attending our virtual version of Holocaust Memorial Day. 27th January marks the anniversary of liberation of Auschwitz-Birkenau, the largest Nazi death camp. The Holocaust threatened the fabric of civilization, and genocide must still be resisted every day. Our world often feels fragile and vulnerable, and we cannot be complacent. Even in the UK, prejudice and the language of hatred must be challenged by us all. Holocaust Memorial Day is for everyone. Each year across the UK, thousands of people come together to learn more about the past and take action to create a safer future. We know they learn more, emphasise more, and do more. Together we bear witness for those who endured genocide and honour the survivors and those whose lives were changed beyond recognition. A light in the darkness. A light in the darkness, that's what I wish to be. When you feel lost and all alone, let me be the one light you can see. A light to illuminate a path when you are feeling lost, to never ever give up hope no matter what the cost. A light to guide you from the dark to a better place where you can see the future is not completely lost. From your burdens you can be free. A light that gives you promise that in your heart's hopes flame burns inside. Treasure all things that are good. Let my light become your guide. Inspire, cook, create, read, watch, and remember, be together.
Well, good evening, everyone. I'm very grateful that despite the bizarre times that we find ourselves in, the Borough Council was determined to commemorate Holocaust Memorial Day this year, as it has done every year since the very first occasion in 2001, which of course is 20 years ago. And I'd like to begin by thanking Councillor Jonathan Nunn and Councillor Anna King in particular, and her team, Vicky Rockhall and Amy and everyone else in the team, for setting all this up. Each year Holocaust Memorial Day has a theme. This year it is Be the Light in the Darkness. And this is a really topical, because almost all religions and culture use light in some way. For example, in my own religion, Jewish festival of Hanukkah is also known as the Festival of Lights. Diwali, the Hindu festival, is known as the Festival of Light. At Christmas, of course, we have bright lights inside and outside. In Buddhism, light is used as a symbol in the ritual of the 8 offerings. And Islam has several references to light in the Quran. And Holocaust Memorial Day gives us an opportunity to shine a light into the darkness of the denial and the distortions of genocide and identity-based prejudice and hostility that still exists today. So I'll ask you a question. How can you defend the indefensible? Well, what you do is you pretend that it didn't happen. And I find it fascinating that it's 75 years since the end of the Second World War, and we still see a succession of films about it on television, repeated over and over again. So, for example, during this Christmas period, we saw Operation Crossbow, we had 633 Squadron, the Heroes of Telemark, the Dam Busters, and lots of films about the war and about the Holocaust. There is so much material already about the Holocaust, and yet more programs and films are being made. So the amount of interest in the Holocaust is phenomenal even now. But despite this, Holocaust denial is on the increase. There are still those who say it's a myth, it didn't happen, or it's an exaggeration. There are always casualties in war, and this is just one of these things that happen. And they say it's effectively been put together, they call it the big lie. It's rather similar to those people who at present are saying, and still saying, that COVID-19 is a myth. As recently as November of last year, Dr. Roger Hodgkinson, who's a Canadian pathologist, said in an interview, he called COVID-19 the greatest hoax ever perpetrated on an unsuspecting public. And he added that there is utterly unfounded public hysteria driven by the media and the politicians. And even worse are those who say that COVID-19 does exist, but it's part of a Jewish and Chinese conspiracy, or else a Jewish and Zionist American conspiracy. And who's putting this out? Well, you could not get such unlikely bedfellows as Turkish and Iranian politicians on the one hand, and the extreme right-wing groups such as the Daily Stormer, which is a periodical in America, on the other hand. So extreme left on one side, extreme right on the other, and they are all saying it is a Western Zionist conspiracy. And how can we defend ourselves against this? Well, what we do is we shine a light on it, and this is the theme of Holocaust Memorial Day. It is only by exposing these denials that we can show the world what is being said and fight them as best we can by bringing it out into the open. I will conclude by singing the traditional memorial prayer, which is El Mole Rachamim, which the Hebrew is, O Lord, who is full of compassion. Before that, I will say a prayer which was composed for last year's Holocaust Memorial Day by the Chief Rabbi, by the Archbishop of Canterbury, by the Chief Imam of Islam and other faiths, and it was put together. This was called a prayer for Holocaust Memorial Day. The El Mole Rachamim prayer goes back to the origins of Judaism. It was said as a memorial originally for close relatives, but it's been adapted over the years to meet different circumstances. And the version that I will be singing is the prayer for martyrs. It was composed in the 11th century, and it was adapted over the years and further adapted to remember the Holocaust. I will then be asking for 1 minute's silence, and then I shall finish the silence by blowing the shofar, which I have here. This is one of the oldest musical instruments known to mankind. It's made from a ram's horn. It has no mouthpiece, keys, no valves. Normally, its use as religion is for our high holy days, such as New Year, Rosh Hashanah, the Day of Atonement, Yom Kippur. But at the time of the temple, it had several secular uses, including sounding an alarm, and in particular, announcing the start of the Jubilee year, when all slaves were automatically set free. So once I've recited the memorial prayer, we will think of those millions of people who perished at the hands of the Nazis and their allies. And during the 1 minute silence at the end of the shofar, as it was blown to signify the freedom of slaves, I will blow it tonight to commemorate and celebrate the freedom of those slaves who were released from Auschwitz 76 years ago. So I'll begin by reciting the prayer for Holocaust Memorial Day. Loving God, we come to you with heavy hearts, remembering the 6 million Jewish souls murdered during the Holocaust. In the horrors of that history, when so many groups were targeted because of their identity, and in genocides which followed, we recognize destructive prejudices that drive people apart. Forgive us when we give space to fear, negativity, and hatred of others simply because they are different from us. In the light of God, we see everyone as equally precious, manifestations of the divine, and can know the courage to face the darkness. Through our prayers and actions, help us to stand together with those who are suffering, so that light may banish all darkness. Love will prevail over hate, and good will triumph over evil. Amen. Now I'll turn to the memorial prayer, El Mole Rachamim. El Mole Rachamim, Shachen Bam Ramim, Chamtei Menucha Nechano, Al Kanfei Hashchina, B'mahalaus Kedoshim Utzacharim, Kazar Harakia Maskirim, Es Nishmas HaKedoshim V'Tzacharim, Shechu Masu, V'shenichhergu, V'nishdishchatu, V'shenisrafu, V'shebitzbahu, V'shenichnaku, Al Kiddush Hashem, Al Yedei Hatzrim HaGermanim, Yimach Shomom V'zicharom, Ba'avur Sheblei Neder, Etein Tzedakah, Bihad Haskoras Nishmosechem, Began Eden, Tehei Menuchasom, Lochen Bial Horachamim, Yastireim B'seiseh Kanafoli Aolomim, V'yitrov B'trau HaChayim, Es Nishmosehem, Adonai Hu Nechalasom, V'yonachu V'shalom, Al Mashkavosehem, V'nahomar, Amen.
He comes thirsty on sea. The shore dawn of Galilee. Lies on Freya, all save for the ship is gone, and the calm is fair. Your county follow, fire never to sea. The ship would mouth of your Magdala, out the your heaven because thou have been the gam sham shaka Inform He's already
It's upside down to me.
Right, last verse. You're born in virtue of life, as I believe.
Like I said.
You're right.
Be the light in the darkness. Theme for Holocaust Memorial Day, 27th of January. And throughout history, there has been much darkness. The Holocaust was one such event, but although lights shone through to resolve that such events should not happen again, we have had Cambodia, Rwanda, Bosnia, Darfur, and many more, a true reflection of a darkness that seems to be resident in our world. But then there is hope, which is being able to see that there is light despite all the darkness. In all our darkest moments, we must focus to see the light. Dwight Moody said, "We are told to let our light shine, and if it does, we won't need to tell anybody it does." Lighthouses don't fire cannons to draw attention to their shining. They just shine. We must not forget the Holocaust and other such events. Therefore, our light must never go out. Martin Luther King Jr. said, "Darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that." No matter how dark it gets, it is so hard to extinguish the light. If there is light in the soul, there is beauty in the person. If there is beauty in the person, there will be harmony in the house. If there is harmony in the house, there will be order in the nation. If there is order in the nation, there will be peace in the world.
Today, we are remembering the 6 million victims of the Holocaust. Remembering victims is important as it helps us to understand the magnitude of the crimes, and in a time of our history marked by unbelievable cruelty and inhumanity. As the Holocaust moves even further into the past, and those who lived through it and that time become fewer, it's vitally important that we never forget and continue to meet and mark this day with fresh eyes each year. Because the hatred, prejudice and intolerance that drove the Holocaust sadly hasn't receded into the past. In my role as Police, Fire and Crime Commissioner, I've seen some really terrible behaviour that has shocked me, and we can't underestimate the awful things people will do to one another. We need to confront and stand up against hatred of all kinds wherever we see it. It's up to every one of us to call out and confront hate crime and to recognise that it's only by being conscious of the risks around us that we can prevent prejudice and intolerance from happening again. We must learn from the past, become less indifferent, more tolerant, more compassionate, more human, and above all else, be kinder to each other.
So why should we commemorate Holocaust Memorial Day? Well, because we should seek to learn the lessons from the past and recognise that genocide does not take place on its own. It stems from discrimination, racism and hatred. We are fortunate in the UK that we are not faced with the immediate risks of genocide, but we know we must continue to work together to end discrimination of all forms and remove hateful, exclusionary language from our lives. Lessons from the past can inform our lives today, and it is all of our responsibility to work together for a safer and better community. I would like to encourage communities across Northamptonshire to learn more about this year's theme, Be the Light in the Darkness, and to encourage you to reflect on the depths of humanity that it can sink to, but also to reflect upon the ways individuals and communities can come together.
It's a tragedy that's still impossible to comprehend. 6 million Jews and millions of other people murdered. But in the years since, round the world we've seen countless deaths in incidents fuelled by hate. If the pandemic has shown us anything, it's that globally so much more brings us together than divides us. The Holocaust was the result of a slippery slope of prejudice, hate and intolerance. On Holocaust Memorial Day, we do well to remember that we all play a part and that with empathy and compassion, we can create a much more tolerant world.
We recognise that the Holocaust shook the foundations of modern civilization. Its unprecedented character and horror will always hold universal value.
We believe the Holocaust must have a permanent place in our nation's collective memory. We honour the survivors still with us and reaffirm our shared goals of mutual understanding and justice. We must make sure that future generations understand the causes of the Holocaust and reflect upon its consequences. We vow to remember the victims of Nazi prosecution and of all genocide.
We value the sacrifices of those who have risked their lives to protect or save victims as the touchstone of the human capacity for good in the face of evil.
We recognise that humanity is still scarred by the belief that race, religion, disability or sexuality make some people's lives worth less than others. Genocide, anti-Semitism, racism, xenophobia and discrimination still continue, and we have a shared responsibility to fight these evils.
We pledge to strengthen our efforts to promote education and research about the Holocaust and other genocides. We will do our utmost to make sure that lessons of such events are fully learnt.
We will continue to encourage Holocaust remembrance by holding an annual UK Holocaust Memorial Day. We condemn the evils of prejudice, discrimination and racism. We value a free, tolerant and democratic society.
Ooh. and maybe tomorrow you'll see the sun come shining through for you.
Light up your face with gladness, hide every trace of sadness, although a tear may be ever so near. Oh, that's the time you must keep on trying. Smile, what's the use of crying? You'll find that life is still worthwhile if you just smile, smile, you just smile, oh, smile, though your heart is aching, smile even though it's breaking when there are clouds in the sky. You'll get by if you smile through your fear and sorrow. Smile and maybe tomorrow you'll see the sun come shining through for you.
Light up your face with gladness, hide every trace of sadness, although a tear may be ever so near. That's the time you must keep on trying. Smile, what's the use of crying? You'll find that life is still worthwhile if you just smile, you just smile.